Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to RTI Tech Tips by Chad and Speed Tips by Chad and Bob. We've got our guest today is Jason Embers. Jason is one of the owners of RE Suspensions out of the Carolinas. Started his business in 2003. It was you and your father and Kurt Rohrig, I read, started this 17 years ago.
Yep.
And you decided to start a business that was focused strictly on suspension-focused services. I know the area that you're from, you had a lot of knowledge with pavement. And sometimes guys, and I used to run into this a lot of times with when I was helping Brett Moffitt, his crew chief, every time I told him something about what we do on dirt, he reminded me that I didn't know much about pavement. I was just a dirt guy. So in other words, just politely telling me to shut up. and I'm kind of like, you're still going in a circle, man, whether it's a hard surface or I mean, the principles are still basically the same. But you also have a lot of, in your team, have a lot of dirt knowledge, working especially with the bump stop technology.
We do.
And the other thing you have going on is every winter you do a school and your grip seminars. And one thing that's pretty nice, I went to your site a while back and I looked on there that you've got it so that if you didn't attend that school, you can buy the school online. But you've got it broke down to the point where you could actually buy it in chapters. So like if I just wanted to learn about bump stops, chapter 9 is all about bump stops. That's a pretty unique deal.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So, well, grip seminars started with a really good friend of mine, Gary Crooks, who owns Port City Race Cars now. And I think, geez, Bob, I think it was probably 8 or 9 years ago we started this. And Gary and I's main mission was to bring the information that we take for granted here in the Carolinas and Mooresville, and with NASCAR. I mean, just in in Mooresville alone, let alone the surrounding cities with Concord and Harrisburg and whatnot. We have so much information and so much technology at our hands, and everything that we take for common knowledge, the guys that race in Pennsylvania or up in Maine or down in Florida, even out to the West Coast, it takes a long time for that information that's generated here and all the stuff that's learned here. It takes a long time for that information to leak out and get to the smaller tracks around the country. So we started GRIP to try and take all that information that we have and give it out. It was one weekend a year that Gary and I opened up our notebook. We didn't hide anything. We told all the setups, everything that we're doing right now, but we only did it for that weekend. So once GRIP started rolling, we decided to start taping the sessions. And for the guys that couldn't make it down and take 3-4 days off work and fly to the Carolinas and take that much time, that they could buy in and buy the whole segment and watch it at home, and they have access to all those videos for a whole year until the next seminar rolls along. So we took it even a little further and broke it down that if somebody wasn't interested in tires or carburetors or how to fix your brakes, it's you could just buy the sections that you were interested in and watch them repeatedly.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty unique deal. Now let's talk about RE Suspensions. You're known a lot for the bump stop technology, but you also guys are really prominent in the shock market, both pavement and dirt. So tell us a little bit about what RE Suspensions is.
So RE Suspensions started. I was working in the Cup garage in NASCAR, and I got fed up. So decided to quit. And Kurt Rohrig and I got together and decided to start a company that just solely focused on shocks and getting shocks set up for people. So Kurt and I started the business. About a year and a half later, we brought my dad on board. And then in 2008, we bought it from Kurt. So, Dad and I own it solely. And when we first started, it was 100% NASCAR. It was Cup, Busch, trucks, and ARCA. That's really all we focused on. Then we started bringing in some, the asphalt short track stuff. And around 2005, 2006, we started getting into the dirt market because, if you look at the demographics of motorsports in the U.S., asphalt racing and road racing and all the other kinds of racing, it's such a little sliver of the pie. Dirt racing and drag racing were very huge chunks of it. So we decided to go chase after the dirt market. And as of right now, it's really the biggest chunk of our business just due to sheer volume. There's, for every asphalt racer, there's 10 dirt racers out there. So, dirt is a really big part of what we do and where our focus is. And right now too, with all the shock companies, everybody's chasing dirt. Penske and Bilstein and Integra and Olin's and Fox and everybody's chasing dirt. So it's on fire right now.
Well, the dirt market is such a huge market all over the United States, and there's so many classes and there's so many different opportunities for somebody to go racing on dirt. And so I think it's just easier, and there's more facilities, and it's probably a little less expensive to maintain a dirt racetrack than probably what it is a pavement racetrack.
Yep.
For over the long period of time. So I can imagine that would be. So how's your week been, Chad?
So far, so good. Yeah, I didn't go to any races last week, but we got a couple coming up this weekend, so we're preparing for that. And we got a lot of things going on here. We're working towards an expansion in our manufacturing division, so we're busy in the planning stages of that. So plenty to do here.
Awesome. I went to a couple races this weekend, Boone and Marshalltown. I learned something actually very valuable this weekend, and I can't believe that I actually missed this previously. But I work with a few guys, and I've got this one customer that, for some reason or another, it didn't seem to make a lot of difference what we did to the car. The car just never really had what I thought mid-corner speed should be. I mean, it just, it wasn't that he was slow. He just wasn't as fast as I thought he should be. And we'll come to find out, the way the left rear shock, you can adjust the height of the left rear shock. Well, they had that shock adjusted up too high to the point where when the car rolled over and it hiked up, it would actually bottom out the shock equally at the same time that it did with the chain. So what it was doing was it was kind of trying to break that tire loose just a little bit. And I could never understand why. I kind of restart, man, he just couldn't go. And then it would take him like a lap and the car would get pretty good. Well, so anyway, so we found out from the chassis builder that the shock had to have an 8 1/4 or 8 1/8 inch movement or shaft sticking out for everything to work fine. Well, his was 8 3/4. Well, we changed it to the 8 1/8 and went out in the first feature, and of course that thing rolled enough that it had enough travel that he couldn't turn that thing in a 40-acre field. And so we're like, well, at least we know we did something. And so then we ended up choking the chain back up, so we weren't getting so much travel. And man, that car's got all kinds of corner speed now.
Awesome.
And I would have never, I don't know why I missed that, because basically what you needed to do in that situation is tie the right rear up so it's at full roll, or 2.5 inches of shock travel or 2 inches of shock travel, and then just jack it up underneath the seat, and it would have been easy to have spotted that. But I never give it a thought that was that way. And then when I found out that there was this measurement and I checked it, I'm like, oh, well, this makes a whole lot of sense now. So that was my learning thing for the weekend.
Yeah, that's easy to do with over-indexing a cage and overextending the shock, and that stuff is easily missed.
Yeah, I was totally amazed. But Few things we got going on here at RTI. Last week I talked about that we had a video on the RTI Knowledge Center that was the trail breaking, and it was my mistake. That video actually wasn't up yet, but we should have it up tomorrow or the next day for those of you guys that text me and wanted to know why it wasn't there when I said it was there, but I just misunderstood. And then, of course, all of the RTI attendees from the schools that we had this year, Amy wants to make sure you guys let us know how your season's going via Facebook or Instagram. Get us some pictures so we can keep up with all you guys that we talked to. Chad and I visited with throughout the winter and kind of keep us up to speed. First question we've got has a 16 GRT by BHE, and my question is, what's your go-to adjustment when the track slicks off dry slick? Car set up exactly like the manual says, crate killer motor with 5 pounds, within 5 pounds of a 604. Car is super good with wet and tacky, but junk when it slicks off. Well, Kevin, that actually would be a whole bunch of different questions there. Oops.
We lost Jason.
It fell out there. I don't know.
There we go. We're back.
Back.
Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of things there that, just all depends on what the setup is and how much indexing you've got in the like in the left rear and the right rear. When the race, the crate killer motor's not necessarily the optimum in comparison to a 604 when it gets dry slick, even though they've tried to mimic that. It still isn't a real good deal, but that's something that feel free to give me a call here at the shop, and I can spend plenty of time with you and going through and asking you various questions about springs and all that stuff. But that's a fairly complicated question, and I'd be more than happy to have you give me a call during the week.
Possibly on that open engine, you might need a restrictor plate as the night goes on, and we do make I don't know if you're IMCA probably, but IMCA legal one-piece restrictors just to slow down that horsepower at the end of the night when you want to take a little of that bottom end away to not spin the tires so easily. So might be something to think about there too with that open motor.
Sure. Thought of a spring-loaded bird cage to help navigate the droop rules within the late model. Something that only expands under throttle pressure. Hey, Jason, hope all is well. This guy's name is Mike.
How's it going, Mike?
Evidently, he's from up north of the border. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Ooh, that's Chad's department right there.
Spring-loaded cage sounds really illegal. Like
If it isn't illegal, it would sure be illegal quickly.
We actually had a conversation a couple years ago with a guy that wanted me to make the cage like a wind-up toy that had that spring effect. And, I asked him how much money he had and how much he wanted me to spend time-wise on developing that, and that's kind of where that ended. So is there something there? Possibly, who knows? But the time and money to develop it is the problem.
And you'd get away with it once.
Yeah, as soon as you won, it would be over. That reminds me a lot of the split bird cage that we did a few years back, and a guy from North Carolina there won a whole bunch of money with it, and then they took it away. But we had a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. So explain the principles. I don't know how you want to attack it, but the principles of the bump stop, what the bump stop actually does, the different kinds that you have. There's like a Christmas tree type bump stop, and then there's bump springs. And
so, bump stops are nothing new. Bump stops have been around since long before any of us were here. So, beyond catching the car and helping to mitigate over travel of the car, these days we are using bump stops to create a stable chassis platform. So, especially in series where you've got ride height rules, and you got to come through the sticks with the valence so far off the ground you can throw a dog under the valence. So we've got to blow through all this spring force to get the car down, and we want to keep it there. So bump stops created or came back really from the NASCAR guys started it, that we want to take all the spring out of the car and set the car down and leave it there so that our window of operation is, we're only moving an inch or a half inch as opposed to moving 3 or 4 inches. So when we take all the mainspring out of the car and the car gets down, we can maintain our tire patch better. We can maintain our camber curves. We can maintain how the car transfers weight. So, everything we do in racing, or most of what we do, is trying to control and navigate variables within the car. So if we can get the car down and keep it at a consistent platform, then that's eliminating a lot of variables, and that's where the speed comes from. In asphalt, it's almost all to do with tire patch and camber and your dynamic camber. What the tire's seeing in the center of the corner, and when the wheel moves and with a double wishbone and you're swinging a camber curve, you're constantly changing that. So bump stops allow us to get the car down and maintain that platform.
Now, does that have the same effect on dirt? Now, I know on dirt, most everybody kind of focuses on just the right front.
Right.
Pavements, both front tires.
Correct. So yes, it's still the same thing in dirt. When we're trying to control that on the right front, we're trying to get the car scotched up and up on the bars and down on the right front, and we're trying to keep that right front within our camber curve so that our tire isn't consistently changing. Now, when it comes to when we start putting them on the left rear and the right rear, and then we're using them for different purposes. But that's the gist of it. We're just trying to create a stable platform for the car.
Right. And the bump stop, like on the left rear, if you could put one on there, what that does is kind of control when the shock goes into almost a top out situation where it's not such a severe stop.
Right.
Kevin's got a question on load numbers. If suspension travel is 3 inches at one racetrack and 3.5 at another, would you adjust the load to match the suspension travel? Also, can you also discuss whether or not you want to add or remove right front load versus making a spring change? Go ahead, Chad.
Well, if you have the same spring rate and you go to 2 different racetracks and you get a different travel, that has to do with either speed, banking. There's a whole bunch of variables there that are thrown into the equation. So then you have to analyze the surface and say, okay, what do we need at this racetrack because we're over travel on the right front and getting the car down too far. So at that point, sometimes you just add load instead of making a spring change, but then you're going to have a higher ride height. So then you get into that situation where do you tie the car down at ride height and have that loaded suspension just to achieve that final number. So it's a balancing act between that right front, and it's really difficult on your cars because you don't have the bump stop like Jason's talking about, controlling that end number. It's a lot easier to control the end number with a bump stop than it is with just a spring.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Probably in that situation, of course, if you're preloading against the shock, I'd probably put a couple turns of preload maybe in that. And from what my experiences have been, if you have to go more than 4 turns of preload on a spring, that's telling you the spring is not stiff enough, and you need to just stiffen up the spring to get so that you have more stability, like Jason was talking about. I currently have a 2015 B&B IMCA stock car running a 200-pound 16-inch left rear and a 250 13-inch right rear. The car gets tight under the throttle in mid-corner. What do you feel would be the right adjustment to help keep the car rotating? Well, what'd you say?
Panhard bar up if you're rolling tight.
It's an IMCA stock car.
Never mind. There's no Panhard bar there.
There's no Panhard bar. In that situation, I would probably put a little bit more angle in my right rear trailing arm because they've got adjustments there to put a little more angle in it. The other thing is I'd probably contemplate putting a wheel spacer on the right rear. If the car's got a high center of gravity and it's rolling over, that 250 is making sure that tire is implanted into the dirt. Maybe widen out that rear end base just a little bit. I play a lot with wheel spacers, left side, right front. We do quite a bit with that. That would be one of the things that I would suggest. If your car is able where you could put some trail in it, that might be something to do too, trail that right rear back just a little bit. Bob's got a question. Should you use left side percentage to adjust for track conditions? If so, what are your suggestions for a heavy versus dry IMCA stock car, low bank, quarter mile? Well, the stock car, you're kind of limited. I mean, you're on the verge of being right close to the weight rules. So if you go trying to add a bunch of left side weight to it, you're going to just have a heavier race car. So sometimes that's good. Sometimes I don't think that's so good. But, in my opinion, 52% is common for a stock car. If on a heavier racetrack, if you could increase the left side percentage or so, it would be a lot better. And that's another one of those deals where you can dictate what that car does with wheel spacers or wheel offsets. You can, put 2-inch offset wheels on the right side for when it gets real heavy. That's an option to do on those cars. 3,000 pound open stock dirt, right front soft spring setup, 450 to 650 pound right front spring. Could you make a suggestion on the bump stop pound rating and shock rebound compression suggestion? That one would be for you, Jason.
Yeah, and that's tough because so much of that depends on the track and how rough or smooth it is and how far you want to be into the bump spring or bump stop, either one. So it's for a 3,000 pound open stock dirt car, I would probably, and I'm straight up guessing, be in the 12 to 1,400 pound range, and being in at a half inch. The rougher the track, the softer the spring. Not knowing where he's going.
Sure. That's a good suggestion.
So the further you want to be into it, the softer the spring, because load is load. We've especially like with everybody that's getting a hold of Chad's machines here, the load machines. It's a car can only generate so much total load going around a racetrack, and we can't change that total load number. We can just redistribute it a little bit. So if we want to be into that bump stop, just a 1/4 inch, and that's where we're going to stop it because it's a real smooth racetrack, then we want a really stiff bump spring, because we're only going to travel and we need to build up a lot of load in a short distance. So typically that's not what we're looking at for dirt. In dirt, we usually want to be into it 3/4 to an inch. So, we'd back off that spring rating from there with the rougher tracks.
He runs a smooth, dry, slick 3/8 mile high bank.
Smooth. Then I would probably stick with that. Probably the 1,000 to 1,200 pound range. Being in it about a half an inch.
USRA street stock. Upper mounts on the quick change are mounted up higher from the axle housing than the 9-inch due to the physical size of the quick change. Advantage, disadvantages due to the upper angles. Well, yeah, the idea behind that, of course, is that, when you have more angle like that, it's supposed to give you more traction. However, the problem with that is sometimes if you get too much angle, then you have short spurts of traction. So I would try to get those mounts mounted as low as you possibly can on that quick change. I think that would work a whole lot better for what you're trying to accomplish there. You are restricted because the quick change is a little bit taller. On an IMCA modified is a 400-pound right front spring with a 1-inch wheel and a 1/2-inch spacer, too soft. Shock bottoms out most of the time. Should I go up on spring or add preload to the spring? Well, you're actually putting a lot of leverage on that spring. To be honest with you, a 400-pound spring, in my opinion, is on the verge of a little bit soft. Even if you try to preload it, it's still a 400-pound spring. Then you go from a 1-inch wheel and then a 1/2-inch spacer beside. The leverage, the actual wheel rate on that spring is extremely soft. So I could see where you'd be bottoming out the shock most of the time. I definitely think that you need to be in the 450, 475-pound range if you're going to run that 1-inch wheel.
Back to Eric's question, Jason, do you have one of your bump spring preloaders like on the banner there to show?
I actually do here, and that's something else that we came out with last year. So we came out with these bump spring loaders for basically when you need load and not rate, and that could be a whole segment within itself. But when we're looking for a certain load number, but once we engage it, we don't want it to climb with the rate. So we came out with this bump spring preloader, and they've worked out very well. We're moving a lot of these things, especially in the asphalt series. A lot of guys are running them in the left front. Got a handful of guys in dirt late models running supers, running them in the right front. So they're working out pretty good.
One of the things that we have going on here at BHE that I was supposed to remind everybody of, we use that example. Last week we talked about brakes. Well, if you don't use brakes, what else happens? You probably use front bumpers. So since we decided that some of you guys that are going to be racing 7 days here in the next stretch, you're probably going to need some more bumpers. So we've got a program. If you buy 2 bumpers, you get 10% off the 2 bumpers. And just a little bit of an incentive there if you need some bumpers, we've got a pretty good deal for you. Any other questions or anything? Chad, what new do you have that you'd like to share with us?
Well, one of our new pieces that we worked on actually with Jason, so we kind of timed this out for tonight, but with the travel limiters on the open cars, like the dirt late models and the modifieds, particularly the World of Outlaws made a new rule that they could have a 2-inch diameter and 1-inch tall. Well, anything with neoprene won't travel. So what guys were doing is they were going in there and drilling holes and doing things to take rate away and get travel. Well, once guys started calling saying they were breaking stuff, I went to my buddy Jason there, and I knew he had all this bump stock technology, and said, hey, we need something foam to meet this rule that'll actually travel and not blow apart. So we worked hard with Jason on these, and he developed 4 different rates for us on the limit chain stuff, and these are actually working real good. We got them on quite a few of the open dirt late model and modified teams, and we're pretty excited. Cade Dillard won last weekend, won the World of Outlaw race with one, so that's one of our new products that we've been working on this summer.
Awesome. Ryan's got a question. A 20-inch left rear 100-pound spring behind the housing on a UMP modified. Am I going in the wrong direction, crushing this down to 200 pounds on a spring crusher. No, actually not. You're not going the wrong way on that. One of the things with that 20-inch spring, you're going to have a little bit more opportunity to create some bow. And I don't know what brand of sliders that you use behind the housing, but Chad's new slider, you can explain how that spring sets in there, and it helps keep these tall springs from bowing.
So, sorry, there was just an explosion outside. Somebody blew a tire on something. Jesus. I didn't know if they were coming to the building or what. Anyway.
Well, that's just like last week when I stayed up at your place in the motorhome. At 6 o'clock, these semis are coming off the interstate. And I'm like, holy cow.
I'm pretty sure one blew a tire outside the door here. What were we talking about? Sliders. Yeah, the 20-inch tall, 100-pound springs. They travel so much, and our new stuff, we're grabbing the OD of them springs because they're so light and they wander around on the cup. And then that allows us to put a 5-inch Torrington bearing in there too. So when you take them springs and smash them, 5 inches, 6 inches, whatever, we're smashing them to get the rate. Them springs, they bow and twist. And Jason could probably talk a little bit about that. He's done a lot of work with spring dynos and that kind of stuff. But that's the biggest thing with that soft rate stuff is you need to make sure you're not getting it bowed out of the cup real bad.
Because when it bows, the other thing you need to look at is it creates friction within the system. So when that spring bows, it takes your shock and it puts it in stress. It puts one side of the piston in stress and the other side of the shaft bearing in stress. And when we introduce friction into the system like that, it kills grip. So when we can take that and eliminate that, it's free grip. The Torrington bearings help tremendously. Anybody that runs a coilover, or like Chad said, with the sliders and the ability to run a Torrington bearing, that's free grip. Anytime you can unhook one side of that spring and keep it, because when springs compress, they want to twist. So if we can take that friction out of that system, it's not huge. It's not going to take a 10th place car and put them on the pole, but it's free grip. So yeah.
And wouldn't, in that situation, due to the fact that they actually really don't need to travel because it's the left rear, wouldn't they be better off with a 16-inch spring with that same rate? I mean, a shorter spring, wouldn't that bow less, or is it still going to bow the same?
The shorter the spring, the less tendency it's going to want to bow.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'd highly recommend you're doing what you're the question. You're doing what you said, loading it to 200 pounds. But I'd highly recommend considering putting a 16-inch spring in there. The 20-inch springs they're just too tall in my opinion. Let alone just trying to get them hooked up.
Right.
Shane's got a 2014 GRT set up for cruise or CR USA rules, modified basically Northern Sport Mod rules. Currently, 16-inch center to center on the bar length have a something.
Minimum
rule.
Minimum rule. Okay, got it. Minimum rule of 16 inches center to center. Is it worth running shorter? And any spring recommendations on all four corners? Well, that particular car, with it being very close to our Sport Mod program, those cars, we're still running 550s, 525 right fronts, 550 left front, rear. We've got some guys out here that are running the 100-pound 16 or the 100-pound 13-inch spring. We can't run a 16-inch spring, but if you can run a 16-inch spring, that 100-pound 16-inch with a 225 to 250 right rear, our standard setup that's still working very good is a 175 left rear with a 225 right rear. Still works very well. Is it worth going to that 15-inch bar? On the right side, I think I wouldn't, if you've got the holes to do it, I think the shorter one on the right rear probably wouldn't be a bad idea. It's going to make the car steer quicker, depending on the type of racetrack that you're running. Matt's got a question. With a Wasota B-Mod, what does moving the trailing arms closer to the rear end on the Weir's 3-link brackets do? Moving the trailing arms closer to the rear end. Well, you got to be careful on your Wasota B-Mod because you've got that rule that they can't be over a 5-degree split between your right and your left. But moving him closer to the rear end is just going to create
faster motion.
Yeah, it's just motion.
Yeah.
I don't know. In my opinion, I'm not so sure that since you have their rule states that you have to be, like if you're 5 inches on the left, you got to be 5 inches on the right. I don't know if there would be a big advantage of going a whole lot closer. You know, the second from the bottom holes probably be my favorite in that situation on your stuff. Chad, would you drop cup help? Would a drop cup help a dirt modified steer more positive?
Well, I don't know what you mean by steer positive, but the drop cup on the right front definitely gets the car on the right front. So if you want to turn and have a better feel of that right front turning, I would say probably yes. What it does is it helps the car get on the right front and helps it rotate. So.
Yeah, I actually think it would because once again, like Chad said, I mean, it's allowing the car to get on the right front more, and when the car gets on the right front more, it's going to have more impact on steering. Yeah, it's that spring table that we talked about from time to time.
Yes, front end one.
Jason, tell us about the spring table. What have you found over the years with spring table in race cars?
I'm not sure what you mean by spring table.
Well, what the spring table basically is like on the rear, as an example, the right rear would be mounted an inch higher up in the car than an inch lower in the car than the left rear, so that the car kind of, the left rear is up here and the right rear is here. It seems to tend to roll on a dirt car, seems to tend to make them roll a little bit easier.
Yeah.
With Chad's drop cup, we're basically doing the same thing with the front end, only we're dropping the right front down to create the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Have you had much experience with playing with any of that stuff?
I haven't. A few of the guys in my shop have that we've messed with it, but what you're saying is right. It's pickup points and where the car. I like your analogy, a spring table. That's how it sits, and that's the attitude that of where the forces are going to pick up on the chassis. Yeah, I've never heard it referred to as a spring table. I like that.
There's gains on the asphalt too, FYI.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have the same effect on a pavement car as it would. Yeah. I mean, of course, on a pavement car, half an inch could be a mile. I mean,
that's big there, yeah.
Yeah, where a dirt car, we're talking a little bit. We have a little more leeway as far as sensitivity goes. When you move the wheel spacers on the car, it affects cross weight. Should you compensate for this by screwing on the weight jacks to keep the cross weight the same? Well, when you move a wheel spacer, it's definitely going to change the cross weight. It's going to change the left side percentage. The only thing it won't change is rear percentage. If I'm only moving it a half an inch, I don't worry too much about it. If I'm going to go to an inch spacer, I will have pre-decided that at home in the garage, so I knew whether I needed to put a turn or two or around in what spring. The thing that when you do that, you have to remember it's just not one spring. You might have to do, like a half a round in the right front and a complete round in the left rear to compensate for it. But if you're doing anything that's over a half an inch, I would take the time to check that out, like I said, at home in the garage and see just exactly what it does, because it's going to change. If you suck the right front end, it's going to gain you're going to lose some left side percentage, and which once again what we're really talking about is moving the wheel closer to the spring. So we're changing the actual wheel rate on that particular corner. When you change the wheel rate, it's going to be the same. It's not the same, but the feel for the driver is going to be almost the same as going to a softer spring. Stacking a rubber foam bump stop on top of the spring bump, will it eliminate the chatter feel in the steering wheel?
It could, if the chatter's, depending on what the chatter's coming from. If it's coming from the spring going solid, then yes, it could help that a little bit. Sometimes when we get drivers that are getting chatter in the wheel, it can become, it's because you're not either fully into the stop or you're on and off of it. So if the spring's going solid, then yes, that will help. Which could be an indication that you're maybe too soft on your bump spring.
Good point. Running an IMCA Sport Mod, looking to get more side bite out of it. Running 8 inches of Panhard bar rake, would you go higher to help it induce the povo stick effect? No, 8 inches of rake is pretty good. If you're going to adjust it and you needed to get on the right side a little more, you would take and drop the whole Panhard bar down. But I would do that a quarter of an inch when you're starting to do some of those changes can be quite a bit. In that situation, I'd probably contemplate maybe moving some weight around in the car rather than I'm just not a huge fan of adjusting the Panhard bar a lot on these dirt cars. I think there's other things that we can do accordingly. And if you've got weight added to the car, I'd highly recommend, maybe moving a little bit of weight to the right side or something to that effect. How much are you preloading on a 225 pounds right rear? Well, the preload on a right rear is going to be pretty well set by what the total weight of the car is going to be when it's on there. Is that correct, Chad?
Yeah, I don't know if we're talking about preloading with a chain on there or a preloading device, but I think that's pretty much set by wheel rate, and it's kind of illegal to run preloaders on a lot of places, so we would need more data there to explain that better.
Yes, by far. Let's see. Hi, Pat Fagan. We all said hi.
Hi, Pat Fagan.
Your turn, Jason.
Hey, hi, Pat.
All right. Bell's got a question. He's got a 2010 Shaw, tight going in, loose coming out. What do I adjust?
Needs that drop cup on the right front.
Yeah. Well, the tight going in thing, that's a loaded question. It could be a brake issue. It could be the right rear stuck too far underneath the car. Your looseness coming out, I'll guarantee you, is caused by the tightness getting in. So if you can work on figuring out what's causing that tightness getting in, once again, like I said, half-inch wheel spacer on the right rear can be a big help. You could put more bar angle on the right upper. That's going to actually give it a little bit more tightness for a split second, but once you're back on the power, it'll help turn the car. That would be some suggestions. Blaine said that was on a sport mod. Yep, I had a pretty good idea that was on a sport mod. If a car's tight, how do I know if it's a traction issue? Left rear over tractioning or side bite issue? Well, what I tell guys, even though you're belted in the seat and you're all strapped in, you can feel if the car's getting on the right front. When you go into the corner, if it's dumping on the right front, you're going to feel it in your shoulder. If it's dumping on the right rear, you're going to kind of feel it in your shoulder too. Most times, if you have a situation where when you're just entering the corner and right when you just get back on the throttle, it's more than likely a side bite issue where the car's just stuck too hard, it's rolled too hard on that right rear. However, if it gets to the point where you get to the middle of the corner and then you throttle it up, and then all of a sudden the left rear overpowers the right front, that's telling you that you either need to add some traction to the right tire. I'm not a big believer in taking traction away from a tire, so I would probably work on something to add traction to that right rear tire. So my builder says preload right rear to 3 inches at ride height and left rear 300 pounds at ride height, and my left rear 100 pound at full droop.
Yeah, so he's talking loads on the coilovers, which, I mean, that you said it right there when you said my builder said. So you got to kind of basically go off your chassis recommendation. That goes back to the stay in your own notebook deal. I mean, you can't say that this guy's got 500 pounds, this car's got 300 pounds. If them shock mounts are off by an inch and a half, different location on the suspension cage, there's a lot of determining factors that determine that corner load, what it should be. So comparisons should be brand to brand unless you know that them shock mounts are in the same location, right, Bob?
Yeah, and seeing even, I mean, and when Chad's talking about the shock mounts, I mean, it could be, your one builder might move that bird cage in 1/2 inch, and that throws the whole equation off. So you can't, you got to go with what your builder tells you because he's done the research, he's worked it, and that's what his suggestions are. And maybe, and you talk to your builder, I mean, he's not probably telling you that is etched in stone. He's telling you that's a good place to start. You might end up having to do a little tweaking yourself where you run maybe a little bit less on the left rear or a little more on the right rear, or whatever the case would be. He knows your race car better than all of us do at this point in time. What's the best way to prep a Hoosier G60 for a stock car? Well, I'll tell you, stock car, and by the way, now that you mentioned that stock car, we do actually have our stock car DVD done. It's ready to be shipped out. We're going to have the online done by tomorrow, so that class will be online. In my opinion, prepping a tire, I like the idea of just scuffing that tire with some 80 grit sandpaper, an 80 grit disc. Just don't tear it up, just kind of rough it up, break the shine off of it. Works pretty good. Everybody's got a different opinion on siping. Like I said, front tires, I tend to like to sipe at a 15 to 20 degree angle. Right rear tire, I like to sipe across the tire, same with the left rear. But, siping, of course, is going to be, if you sipe around the tire, you're going to get more side bite. If you sipe across the tire, you're going to get more forward bite, and that's all within reason. Kurt wants to tell Larry to soak it in track claw. I've had experience with that track claw back in my go-kart days, but I've not really had any experience with the plastic type tire that we're running. I don't actually think I would mix any chemicals in that situation. When you talk about the spring table, do you want the table leaning downhill towards the right side of the car? By far. And if I could actually take the table of the 4 legs, I would have the 2 left side legs as close to the same as I could. I'd have the right front 2 inches shorter and the right rear 1 inch shorter, just as a guess. Because the main objective is to get the car on the right front. Whatever happens to the right front is going to follow with the right rear. So just a little bit of difference there is going to help induce that, and I think that would make the car very drivable. How much are the brakes supposed to grab? Because I got new pads and rotors on it, and it feels like they aren't grabbing. I bled the brakes, and they feel weak. Well, if you bled the brakes and they feel weak, I don't think that has anything to do with your pads or your rotors. That's more of a master cylinder problem or a wheel cylinder problem. Because they should, new ones definitely should work very well.
Plastic lines could be line flex too.
Yeah, it could be the lines flexing. I've even seen, if you've got real long lines on the wheels, I try to keep them as short as I can because they will flex too. So, anything else that you guys have that you want to talk about?
What other cool stuff you got there, Jason? Did you bring some other bump stops to show, or spring rubbers, or what other cool stuff you got there?
We did. So when Chad, called us in developing his 380, his limiter, it drove us to create a whole new line of basically just pucks. So this is one of the most popular pucks Chad's running in his left rear limiter, which is our blue 1 inch thick with a 1/2 inch hole. So we've created the same stop in red, white, blue, and black in 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch thick. So even if you're not running these in the limiter, it's still an option for regular bump stops and what you want to do. And earlier, Bob, you asked about, the difference in stops and what's out there. And yeah, it all depends on where you want to go. The foam stops that we run, like, the Penske stops or the COT type stops, the Christmas tree ones, anything made out of foam is typically going to be more progressive and have a lot more hysteresis. Hysteresis meaning that what it does in compression is not the same as what it does in rebound. So in compression, you'll have a lot more force. And then as that stop extends, it'll be a lot less, opening up a gap. So when you start getting away from the foams and getting into the solid polyurethanes, the hysteresis drops down and it allows us to get a lot more of a linear type curve. And then obviously going from the solid polyurethane to the springs, which is true linear, it all depends on what you want to do. There's a couple of companies out there that have started stacking bump springs, allowing for dual stage. So, it's anything that you want to achieve. We've got a way to do it.
I think the hysteresis is why that foam is going to be so good in the left rear. We've done so much over the year with foam, with neoprene and the different kinds of material, and then the bump springs on the limiter, and they store so much energy when you're extending that chain, and then it has that rebound and it wants to pull the car back down when you let the fuel, and then it shoots it to the right. So that's when I told Jason what I wanted, and he said foam is the only way we're going to achieve that. So
that was the only way. Chad gave me a travel distance and a number we had to shoot for, and we talked we went back and forth for a couple of weeks and tried a few things, and foam is where we ended up. And it's funny because when bump stops first started hitting the scene again, everybody we were trying to get rid of hysteresis and trying to get away from the progressive type stops. And just like everything else, the more we learn and the more we find out what these race cars want, we've come to find out that hysteresis and stop being progressive isn't necessarily bad. It can be used to your advantage.
That's a good point. Very good point. Ben's talking about his car was really good in the heat. When the track slows down, the featured car gets tight. What are a couple things to look for to loosen the car up? More than likely, if the car is getting tight, once again, that's very possible a right rear issue. When you're on a drier type racetrack, if the car's rolling too much on the right rear, sometimes that can actually create that tightness getting in. And what you're going to find out, and there was a question earlier about the right, the tight part of it, whether it's a throttle tight or side bite tight. If you've got a car that's a side bite tight situation, the car goes into the corner and the car gets tight right off the bat when you get into the corner. Then when you get on the throttle, it kind of tries to become a little tight, but you're kind of halfway steering it and it's going pretty good. And then when you get to phase 3, all of a sudden the car will just actually snap loose. When the driver comes in, he says, my car's snappy loose. He's got too much side bite in the right rear tire getting into the corner. That 9 times out of 10, unless there's a suspension issue, 9 times out of 10, that's what we'll find. What's the best way to square rear end on a sport mod? Well, that's kind of a difficult situation. You're going to have to probably talk to your chassis builder. Back in the day when I owned Harris Auto Racing, you could square the car off of the motor plate. You could drop plumb bobs off the motor plate and put a straight edge across the motor plate, and that would work really well. Nowadays, with the motors being turned or some of those things, I don't know. You have to ask your chassis builder on that situation. We used to go off of the lower control arms. The front lower control arms off the greaser can come back, but then again, if you've got a car that's built with a turned stub, that's not going to help you either there. So you need a little bit more history about your car. If the car's got a straight up stub and your A-frames are all straight, going off of that lower grease zerk's pretty decent. What's a good way what have you found, Jason?
Oh, you're way outside of my wheelhouse there, Bob.
Well, I didn't know. I know when David Strimming was on with us, he talked about all of the squaring part of the car that he learned from his pavement days, and I never asked him to elaborate on that because we were getting close to time. But
I know back in the day when Dick Trickle was still with us and around, Dick Trickle could square anything with a couple plumb bobs and a tape measure. He'd plumb bob the snot out of a race car, and they'd always be straight.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way you got to do it. Chad and Jason, do you have a tool to use in your Smasher to test various bump stops without having to set bump stop into the shock and spring?
Yeah, Chad's bump stick. That's what we use.
Yeah, so we make it just slips apart. It's an asphalt piece bump stick. You can put it in the Smasher and then it just slides apart, so you can change them really fast.
Just make sure if it's a foam stop or a polyurethane, make sure you've got a washer on both top and bottom to give it 2 level surfaces to test it. But yeah, that's what we use.
Okay, Chad, what drop cup do you recommend for the right front on a sport mod? Well, it's your standard.
Yeah, we only make one drop cup. It's one dimension. We've had requests for halfway between, but we haven't tooled up for that. So,
when the track gets rough, what direction should I go with a bump spring? Softer or harder? Switch type? ? Well, you would want to go softer, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you'd want to go softer because we're looking at a bigger displacement. And then switching the type, I'd need more information. When you go with a softer stop or go to like the foams that are very progressive, that have a very low amount of force when you first get into them, and then they build up force as you travel. That could be an answer, but I'd need a lot more information before I could answer that.
Now, if some of these guys want to call RE Suspensions and they're interested in this type of stuff, but they have more questions, are they free to call?
Absolutely.
What's the phone number?
Our phone number is 704-664-2277. And you can ask for me or Donnie. Donnie's our big dirt guy. He's pretty switched on with a lot of these modifieds and stock type cars. Cal, JC, we've got 7 guys down there that one of us will help you out for sure.
Well, the thing with your place, like I said, from what I have read and what I know about it, is you guys are by far the experts in some of the suspension stuff, and especially when it comes to the bump stuff. I've not known anybody that. I think I've actually called you a couple times on that subject before. We don't actually run them, so it's not something that I have a lot of knowledge with, and that's why Chad and I were both looking at each other like, oh my God, when they started asking these bump stop questions out east. But
Right.
hopefully, though, those guys tuned in and they watched the show, and if they've got any more questions, they'll give you a call.
Absolutely. Just that if I can say one thing about bump stops is it scares a lot of guys off, and it's really not a hard concept. Once you don't be scared of it, get to working with it, and it'll, just like everything else, the light bulb will switch on, and it's like, oh, I got it, and we can help you get there for sure.
Awesome. Well, one last thing that I have, Harris Clash registration is open. We will be at Deer Creek August 4th, and it'll be the 29th annual Harris Clash. I don't know if that means that I'm getting older. We've been just doing it that long. I think maybe both. So I'm looking forward to it. Chad and I are going to do our show up there live at the racetrack. So we got plenty of time to pre-warn everybody on what they're going to get to see and hear. And we'll probably get some of our buddies to be on there for 5 minutes at a time or something like that. Well, I sure appreciate you coming on tonight, Jason. I learned a lot just listening to all these things, and I can't wait to tomorrow. I'm going to re-listen to this and take some notes.
Absolutely. And Bob, I really appreciate you having me. Chad, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you guys. And anytime you guys need help, just let us know.
Thanks,
all
Jason.
Right. Yep. Sounds good. Well, thank you guys.
Appreciate it.